Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Another entry for you here based on your suggestions. This one by far remains one of the most interesting ones I have ever come across. I still don't know if I should even classify it as a cryptid because it seems so much of an original thing. I mean, I don't know if it's a cryptid, if it's any kind of monster, if it's a spirit, if it's a ghost, if it's an urban legend, who knows? But this particular thing, whatever it is, a lot of people are able to conjure it on its own and personalize it to their own satisfaction, like to their own way that they want to personalize it. And I still don't know how to classify this. Just for the sake of this video, though, I'm gonna go ahead and I guess categorize it as a form of a cryptid because it instantly reminded me of one of my favorites, which is the genius Loki, which was something that you could not see, you could not hear, you could not smell, you could not touch, all the senses basically, and yet it's still there. And in this case, very, very similar. I'm talking about something that's called the Tulpa. I've never heard of this thing again, but apparently there is a whole world of this out there. People that have worked hard on doing these things to create their own tulpas, people that have had great success, others that have had apparently some kind of horror stories tied to their creations. But again, I still don't know how to categorize it. And what I'll do is I'll give, I guess, as much information as I can. I'll even include a link for apparently it's like an article of some sort that goes into some deep discussions about what a tulpa is and how to create one. In hindsight, though, I don't know about this stuff. I don't really recommend it. This stuff seems a little bit, I don't know. I think a lot of things can go wrong with something like this. So I don't know if the people that actually do these things and that are successful, if it's all in their head or if it's something else entirely. But that being said, I would err on the side of caution with regards to anything like this, only because, again, so many things can go wrong. But first, let's talk about what is a tulpa. That's the hard part. In essence, the simplest way to describe it is it's an imaginary friend. Basically, it's something that people create where it's an adult version of their imaginary friend. In other words, kind of like we all when we were kids, and there was the idea that kids were able to talk to someone that only they saw or they heard as kids, but later on in life, obviously, they dropped it. Well, here, as adults, people are doing the same thing. Crazy stuff. I had no idea that there was this thing existing in this world today. There are websites dedicated to this. There's like a Reddit site. Even the New York Times talked about this. There's a great article in Vice as well that talked about this as well. So, again, this is a whole other world that seems to exist on these imaginary friends. And because it's so hard to grasp like what they are because they're so personalized. Basically, it's whatever people want their imaginary friend to be, but it exists in their head only. So in other words, if you are with someone who says they have a tulpa with them, you can't see their tulpa, you can't hear them, you can't touch them, but in that person's mind, they can. And I still don't know, though. Someone has to tell me in the comments, those that apparently have created their own tulpas, how do they, I guess, work with the tulpas? I mean, do they see them in person? Like, is it something standing right in front of them? Or do they, the most common thing is apparently that they hear their tulpas, but is it like a real auditory sound? Or is it something where it's just inside their head? Because obviously, just throwing something out, like you can hear a fire siren in your head right now. Make one up in your head right now, but nobody else will hear it. So if you're imagining that fire, that sound in your head, then is it the same thing like when people that are successfully creating these tulpas, where it's almost as if it's real? Like that's the thing I can't grasp. I don't know if I'm reading this wrong. but that's the one I'm looking for. I'm trying to find like a straight answer. The people that work with these tulpas that created them, is it pretty much as real as if these things were right in front of them? In other words, they can see them, they can hear them, they can smell them, in some cases even touch them. That's the thing that I don't have a direct answer to. But yeah, that's all it is. In essence, it's an imaginary friend that people willingly create. And here's the kicker. Once they create this imaginary friend, then it in turn becomes independent. Like it actually is a real thing. It has its own mind, it has its own thoughts, there's no control over it once it's created, and it apparently stays with the person for life. So the idea is the people that create these things, these tulpas, they do this, and then in turn they create their own sentient life that stays with that person for the rest of their life. The people, by the way, that create these, they're called tulpamancers, and all they do is once they create these things, they do them because the most common reason is companionship. So as far as like where the idea of tulpas first came from, apparently they've been around for a long time, hundreds and hundreds of years. We're talking back into like the ancient days involving Buddhists and also monks. These monks and Buddhists, they would apparently create their own form of a tulpa as a way of like projecting something to guide them, like something that would able to help them when it came to their life, their very strict life guidelines. I mean, these were people that obviously followed a very strict set of rules in life, and so the way that they would navigate through this is they created their own people, I guess you could call them, that would manifest, and at least in their heads, I don't know if it was actually real or some sort, but they would do so to help create that discipline and that wisdom they needed in order to continue the life that they wanted. And in turn, this, I guess, lasted all these years up until now, where some people, especially those that have Western philosophies, where they in turn wanted to create their own imaginary friends again. They relished having that, I guess, as children, and then they in turn wanted to have that again as an adult. And the way they do it is they follow a very strict guideline in order to create these things, and once done so, then they have somebody as a lifelong companion. There's a known case, Belgian French explorer by the name of Alexandra David Neal. She was one that chronicled these practices, and she wrote about it and she researched it, and she was able to actually create a tulpa in her own mind. She said this was her experience. He said, once a tulpa is endowed with enough vitality to be capable of playing the part of a real being, it tends to free itself from its maker's control. This, say Tibetan occultists, happens nearly mechanically, just as the child, when his body is completed and able to live apart, leaves its mother's womb. That's a great analogy, by the way, because in essence, that's what it seems like it is. It's like having a baby inside your body who is completely not independent while it's within the body, but then there becomes that point when it births itself and then it lives its life on its own, yet it's still attached in some way to the mother throughout its entire life. Crazy stuff. This lady, Alexandra, she said she was able to create her own tulpa, which was in the image of a friar-like or friar tuck-like monk, and this little monk developed a life of its own, but later had to be destroyed, which I'll talk about some of the bad experience here in a minute. Now, how, and I keep saying that these things are personalized, is because they are. People create tulpas to their own liking. There are people that apparently create tulpas to look like a fox, like an anthropomorphic fox, like a human-like fox. Others that create a pony. Others that create just regular-looking people. Others that fashion them apparently after anime characters. The whole idea is every single one of these tulpas are individual. They in turn take a little while to be created, and then once they do, they're with that person. Here's the process and how it works apparently. Whenever someone has decided that they're going to go ahead and create a tulpa, apparently it takes a lot of concentration. We're talking if not weeks, months of concentration, and it's you visualizing your companion. The more you visualize, the more concrete that visualization becomes. It's the way I read it is it's like staring at a drawing and then being able to slowly but surely, the more you stare at it, recall what it looks like afterward, after you take your eyes away from that drawing. That's in essence what that is. You start visualizing like the face, you start visualizing the eyes, how you want the eyes to look, you start visualizing like the neck, the rest of the body, you start visualizing how that thing will sound, you'll start visualizing how it'll act, how it'll move, how it'll respond to things, how it'll talk, how it'll be independent on its own. And then there's that one point where it just snaps, and then that's when it's actually there. And when that happens, that's when it catches apparently some people by surprise, because they work so hard at it. They're able to visualize all these things, create this thing, and then bam, it's there, it's alive, and it responds back to the person. Again, I don't know if it's a real voice or if it's something else where it's just 100% imagined inside the person's head. But when that happens, then they're able to work with the tulpa, and vice versa. The tulpa is in turn able to I guess interact with the person. Here's how one person described it in the New York Times. This guy, a young man named Jack, was interviewed by the author who was chronicling information on these tulpas, and he said, Jack told him, he said he decided to make a tulpa back when he was in college, and how he did it was he set aside an hour and a half each day for this. I don't know how long he did it initially, but it took him upwards of 4 weeks. Again, an hour and a half each day doing this, and he would spend the first 40 minutes or so dedicated solely to relaxing and clearing his mind. He wanted to have nothing distracting him from what he was trying to do. Once he felt like he was at a point where everything was cleared, then he started to visualize a fox, because this guy Jack, that's what he likes. He liked foxes. He wanted his tulpa to be a fox-like creature. And then finally, after about 4 weeks of doing this, that's when he said he started to feel a presence, and it seemed like it was actually a fox's presence. How the presence of a fox is as compared to like something else different, like a chicken or a dog, I don't know, but that's how he said that he was able to feel the fox's presence. And then that moment that came, that bam moment where things just snapped, was after a chemistry exam. I guess he was coming home from the exam, and then all of a sudden he heard, and again, I don't know if he hears this outside like in a real world or if it's in his head, but he heard clear as day, "Well, how did you do?" And bewildered, this guy Jack was wondering, like, who said that? Where's that coming from? And then that's when he realized that that was it. He created his tulpa. His tulpa was responding to him about his chemistry exam, and that's when he asked, "Well, how did you do?" And then he realized that that was him. That was the tulpa. And he created him, and they, I guess, interacted with each other. The key thing, though, is apparently with a tulpa, it stays with you forever, but it can in some ways be pushed away if you stop concentrating on it thereafter. It exists only as long as you, I guess, want it to exist in your area, because every now and then, if you stop meditating on it, or if you stop, I guess, thinking about it, and let's say you're concentrating on other things, maybe you have your own family later on, or you have a lot of other things happening in your life, then the tulpa in turn will start I guess disappearing and not interacting as much, until in some cases it's gone, but not completely gone, because there are reports apparently of tulpas every now and then unexpectedly coming back. I guess just either knocking on the person's mind or doing something altogether to try to make sure if the person remembers them. Now, as far as the horror stories about the tulpas, here's what happens, and this is why I caution, I hesitate when it comes to doing anything like this, because the idea of a tulpa also is it lives with you, it lives in you, and in some cases people allow it to control that person. I don't know why, but apparently some people do that. Now, what is the natural inclination whenever you have something like that that allows that you allow to control over you, you lose control yourself. And there are horror stories about people apparently not being able to control themselves, to control their mind, to control their body. That sounds like, in some cases, like schizophrenia. I mean, that sounds like the worst case possible, where you truly are imagining things, you're hearing things, you're being influenced, you have these things, whatever they are telling you to do things, maybe bad things, and then that's when it's really, really bad stuff. So that's why, again, I don't know. All of this, it seems like it's fun in some cases. I mean, imagine having your own imaginary friend that you've always wanted, and that it's something involving something that you could create 100% for yourself. Like, let's say your favorite character is Superman. Create a Tulpa Superman. How crazy, awesome would that be? But at the same time, the idea that you could do this, and apparently it works, and this thing is independent, and it can, in some cases, possess people if you let it. I don't know. That's where it gets pretty bad with that regard. I don't like that. I'm not going to do anything like this. I don't recommend it. So, but if again, there's a whole world for this. If people are interested, I don't know. So, all the information that I'll provide is a link below that goes again into a whole other detail. It's called Kia Haddad's Absolute Guide to Tulpas. I haven't read it. I just skimmed like the first couple of pages, but it goes into a complete detail about tulpas, creating them, what not to do, other information like that. And if you wanted to take a gander, by all means do so. Tulpas can apparently, though, be very helpful in some cases, because they help people with their memory. They help people with being able to, I guess, assist them throughout the day if they're sad, if they need something to be like a pick-me-up of some sort. It's a lifelong companion again. So it's the idea that these things are there to be with you, and because you created them, they're there to help. So fascinating stuff. Never heard of this thing again. Tulpas, whatever they are. I still can't tell what to categorize them as. Again, it just reminded me so much of a Genius Loki that's why I included it with the Cryptids and Monsters series. Does anyone know any more information? I'm sure there's a whole bunch of stuff that I haven't even touched on when it comes to this world. So if anyone has anything else that stands out, please post the information below. It'd be interesting to hear if anyone has, I guess, created the tulpa, to at least let people know like what that's like. I mean, what if it's, again, something that's sensory oriented, or if it's just really just in the person's head. It'd be fascinating to hear that information. So, all right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.